this here is Lenore Zan, a.k.a. Rogue.
It's Cal Dodd here, voice of Wolverine from X-Men, the animated series, Bub. I want you to join me at The Uncanny Experience, the ultimate destination for X-Men fans just like you.
Where you will become a mutant student at Xavier's.
And be able to explore the school campus, shop the vendor hall, and meet the creators and stars of the X-Men universe.
There'll be panels, parties, immersive activities all throughout the historic mansion. Whether you're a fan of the comics or the movies or the animated series, you'll find something to love.
This is Chris Claremont. I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the Uncanny Experience.
It's gonna be one hell of a ride, Bub.
I bet it will be uncanny.
Get your tickets now, sugar, at theuncannyexperience.com.
Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bottom bum bum bottom ba da 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 You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, we've gone back in time and come right back, having changed nothing with Mark Grayson and Adam Eve, as experienced in the Full House arc of Invincible from Image Comics and Skybound Entertainment. And we'll be applying Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel, unlocking the power of emotions to help our kids, ourselves, and our society thrive to their relationship woes.
Going back in time. Is that what you were trying to do?
Yeah.
It was very good.
I was trying to do it without singing because I know that some people are playing the Comic Book Couples Counseling drinking game, and every time I sing, they drink, and I don't want anybody to get alcohol poisoning.
All right. I like this copy a lot, Lisa. I like that we were able to say it all in one go, and there's no reason to stick around for a stinger this week.
Yeah, I nailed it. First try.
We actually just got back from taking a tour of the new Reston, Virginia Barnes & Noble store.
Those of you who are up on your Gullickson lore, Brad and I met as I was just a humble bookseller.
Yes.
He was the music manager.
No, I was bargain
lead.
I was hired as bargain lead. You were already working at the Barnes & Noble Reston store.
That is correct.
And we met at customer service desk, and we've told this story before, but you do not remember our first encounter, even though I remember our first encounter.
Because Brad had mutton chops at the time, and mutton chops are the facial hair that make you invisible to women.
Tell that to Logan. He gets all that game, Lisa.
But I think that that's how he does his undercover ops.
He sneaks in with the sideburns. Right.
He wears those as protection because if he were to not have those, women would be, and all kinds of people, all genders would be hitting on him all of the time, and he'd never get anything done.
I feel like that is happening. And I think your mutton chops make you invisible philosophy is faulty.
Oh, okay. Well, name one person with mutton chops who has been slaying.
I mean, I just did.
In
Wolverine.
the sack.
Wolverine slays in the sack.
No, he doesn't slay in the sack. He broods. He goes like, why won't Jean Grey love me? Those rolling in the hay with Logan are there for his character.
I think this says more about you. And my mutton chops made me invisible to you, and that's fine. Thanks to booksellers like Martina and Brittany, they told me to get rid of those things, and I did. And once I did, you noticed me.
That is true.
And the rest is history. So it's a big deal to have the Reston bookstore back because it did leave many years ago, and it was a tragedy. And it feels like a triumphant return to have the store back. And Elizabeth, the store manager over there, invited us both over to take a little tour. And man, it was so good to get like a first peek in there, an exclusive. The store opens on the 14th. We will be there opening day. And I gotta say, I think this is one of the prettiest Barnes & Nobles I've ever been in.
Barnes & Noble in general is in the midst of a glow
blow up
Yes,
right now.
absolutely.
And they're really changing their approach of how the bookstores are run.
Yeah.
And in the case of Reston Barnes & Noble, the layout of this store is enormous. And the booksellers have a lot of autonomy when it comes to how this bookstore is presented, what the end caps are, what the bookseller recommends are. There's a whole bay for those. And they're really going for the community hub that Barnes & Noble used to be.
This is actually the largest bookstore that Barnes & Noble has opened in about a decade. And the ceilings are huge. It's in a former Office Depot. They kept like that very bright space, that very bright light that Office Depots have, but they've injected some warmth into it. But it's not like the usual, or it's not like the old color screen. There's not so much green in it. There's a lot of white, there's a lot of beige, but it really worked for me. And the backsplash on the cafe is this gorgeous black tile. Everything shines. And of course it's new and new things shine, but I think even as it ages, it's going to keep that shine.
What struck me when we first walked in is that you can't see from the front of the store to the back.
Yeah, very different than a typical Barnes & Noble.
And instead of the shelves being in these rows, like, do you remember in the old Reston you'd go in and it would be like fiction to the right, all in rows,
Yep.
and then romance
Yeah. I mean, pretty boring structure.
So this Barnes & Noble has their shelves all set perpendicularly and kind of interlocking, so you get this like labyrinth feel.
Well, there is a racetrack in the center around like cookbooks, and I think, I'm going to get this wrong, but like gift is over there.
Yeah.
So there's a racetrack in the center, but then on the outskirts, there's like these divided squares.
It's like nooks and crannies. It is like the English muffin of a bookstore.
I mean, it feels like a mythological structure. It feels like a castle. It feels like a maze, but in a great way, like in a way that you want to hang out and stay and browse and read. It's just so inviting. And those nooks and crannies, like the manga section, right?
Yeah, it's like practically a little room.
Yeah, right. You feel like you have discovered a realm within the store.
Yeah.
And you want to stick to that realm. And manga is huge. It's a very large section. Graphic novels, sadly, not as big, but typically that's how it goes with a Barnes & Noble.
But also it's more interspersed within the genres. So the actual graphic novel section, which is mostly like where you'll find your like superhero books.
Yeah, your Wednesday Warrior crowd. Like
that is like what, 2 shelves side by side.
Yeah.
But then you go to the young adult section, there are more comic books. You go to the true crime section. My Friend Dahmer is a face out right now.
Yeah. And in history, there's some graphic novels. There's, of course, the all ages section of graphic novels. So comics are like spread throughout the store, which is really nice to see.
I love the idea of graphic novels being side by side to quote unquote regular books, because I feel like you're going to reach more readers that way.
Yeah. Graphic novels are a medium, not a genre, but there are genres. So if you're going to have genres like true crime and horror, why not put the comics with them? They haven't gone that extreme.
Yeah.
But that's what Brad and Lisa would do.
That is the direction I feel comic books are going.
And in this era of online sellers, places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble has become like Barnes & Noble, remember the days of You've Got Mail. Barnes & Noble was the evil behemoth that invaded the community and stole away your mom and pop bookstore. And that did happen. When Reston first got a Barnes & Noble, the store that Lisa and I worked at, it did push out Little Professor Bookstore, which was also in Reston, RIP. But now, in the era of the online behemoths, Barnes & Noble feels like the community bookstore, almost feels like the mom and pop shop.
They're really embracing the browser.
Yeah.
Because those people, those individuals who know the books that they want, they are going to go order it on Amazon, rather.
Right.
And get it the very next day.
Right.
Where I feel like people go to Barnes & Noble now, and it's like going to the candy store. You're like looking around and going like, look at all of my options. Any of these can be a super sweet delight for me.
One of the new changes that this Barnes & Noble has has done is remove the customer service desk, that hub that usually sits at the center of Barnes & Noble stores. There are still terminals for booksellers to look up books, but there's no longer the hub where they can retreat to and hide out. Now the booksellers are amongst the people, browsing with the people, communicating with the people. I love that.
Brad and I are a little bit opposite when it comes to how we want to be treated at a bookstore.
Sure.
Brad, when he goes into a store, particularly a bookstore, and he's not greeted and he doesn't get those new recommendations and he doesn't have an excited book conversation, he's a little bit disappointed.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go into a bookstore, I find a book and no one talks to me, I'm like, that was a 10 out of 10 experience.
There's
for
a
me.
balance to be had.
But I think that this new setup of this Barnes & Noble serves both shopper. Because if you want to go to the racetrack and do a quick circle and find a bookseller, you can. But if you want to hide and disappear into a corner, there are plenty of corners where you can go and enjoy the books undisturbed.
Yeah. I'm sure people listening to this episode's opening is going like, boy, this is some serious SpawnCon. But I promise it is not. We're just super excited as former Barnes & Noble booksellers, as former Barnes & Noble lovers, to have Reston get its Barnes & Noble back. It's a moment for us, and I hope you don't mind indulging us in this moment of celebration. And again, thank you to Elizabeth and Thomas for giving us the tour of the new Barnes & Noble. I mean, we are obviously in awe of it, and I think it's going to do just gangbusters back at Reston.
Yeah, like Reston has not recovered. We are continuously heartbroken over the loss of our Barnes & Noble, and to have it back, it feels great.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're excited. We also did our Ninja Turtle screening. I wanted to talk a little bit about that real quick. At the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. It was a sold-out crowd, and I was shocked by how many children showed up to that screening.
And they loved Ninja Turtles.
Throughout the whole movie, you heard their laughter. It felt so good.
Yeah, like they love the slapstick stuff.
Yeah.
And they loved that aspect of Ninja Turtles. And of course, the adults, we love the nostalgia. We love the fraternity. And it was really cool to have this like intergenerational experience. It was very warm and loving.
And we have to thank our co-sponsors, the fine folks over at Four Color Fantasies, the Eisner-nominated comic book shop. They provided some really rad giveaways this time. We did our trivia, and we gave away 2 passes to the Washington, D.C. Comic Con, Awesome Con.
Yeah.
We also gave away a signed and remarked copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a single issue from Kevin Eastman. It's pretty neat.
It was.
So, if you're listening to this and you're in the proximity of Winchester, Virginia, even if it's a few hours drive, we really do think it's worth it. We've had people come out of state to our shows, and they've had a great time. We should also thank Ninja Turtles writer Tom Waltz for providing a virtual introduction for that Ninja Turtles screening.
So cool.
We will have, hopefully, fingers crossed, it hasn't been recorded yet, but a virtual intro from a really rad past CBCC guest and a really rad Bat creator for our next screening, which will be Batman Mask of the Phantasm on June 25th at 4 o'clock at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. And then on July 30th, we are going to be screening Scott Pilgrim versus the World again at 4 p.m. And then in August, we're working on that screening, but it looks like we're going to have a comic creator actually in person for that screening. Again, thanks to Four Color Fantasy.
I love that our film club series is becoming bigger and bigger events each month, and you're going to want to join us. So links in the show notes, and we'll keep you posted whenever new tickets go on sale. And if you're a patron, let us know you're coming.
'Cause you get in for free.
That's right.
Now, Lisa, do we consider that last bit SpawnCon, even though it's like SpawnCon for us?
Does does count as singing? Do you have to take a drink?
Okay. I'll let the listeners decide if that was SpodCon or not. And you definitely do have to take a drink. Invincible Full House. We are back to doing sessions with Mark and Eve. Hopefully you're not a new listener. Hopefully you've already listened to our Robert Kirkman interview that launched this whole thing. Hopefully you've listened to our episode on Modern Family. Hopefully you've listened to our episode on Reboot, because this is part 4, Full House.
Though if you are a first-time listener, we appreciate it so much.
Yeah,
go back and listen to those episodes.
Links in the show notes to all those episodes.
We need those listens, baby.
So Mark and Eve are currently in our waiting room, waiting for their counseling session to begin. But before we invite them in for discussion, I wanted to step outside the comic for a minute, Lisa, and celebrate the return of a certain comic book artist to Invincible with this arc.
Are we talking about Invincible co-creator Cory Walker?
We are. Now, when I imagine Invincible in my mind, the art style I see is courtesy of Ryan Ottley. The action, the paneling, the violence. I don't give Cory Walker, the original Invincible co-creator, enough credit, I think. And it was so much fun to return to his style with Full House. His design sense is top-notch, and if you dig any of these characters, you have to thank Cory Walker. He illustrated Invincible's first 7 issues, but he found meeting the deadlines rather difficult, and according to him in a CBR interview from 2009, they were going to kill the book, and he couldn't allow that. So stepping away was somewhat painful, but he recognized it as necessary.
Oh my gosh, that must have been heartbreaking.
Since then, Walker has returned several times to work here and there on Invincible, but maybe most notably with the second to last Invincible storyline, this one that we're about to talk about, Full House. Walker and Kirkman first got together as a creative couple on the Savage Dragon spin-off comic Super Patriot, a book that I recently reread, and I gotta say, it's pretty damn rad. Would recommend that you scour the dollar bins and grab up these 4 issues. When Kirkman was working over at Marvel, the two collaborated a lot as well. This period is so fascinating. It's that moment before Kirkman swore off working with the big 2 companies. He was doing some wild stuff, and I'm not sure Marvel today would allow him to do what he did then. Marvel's Zombies was his baby, as was the irredeemable Ant-Man, which is just a brutally funny, offensive, and cynical comic. Walker did a few issues on that with Kirkman. He did a series called Destroyer with Kirkman too, which was under Marvel's mature line, Max. Everyone remember Max? I miss Max. In Marvel Team Up issue 14, they even brought Invincible to the Marvel Comics universe and partnered him with Spider-Man. I have that issue somewhere, but haven't read it in a while and can't really find it at the moment. Need to I might have to purchase a new issue. I hate doing that, but it might just have to happen, Lisa. So prepare yourself.
It's not that expensive. And also, nothing gives me a deeper sense of security than having doubles of something.
Amen to that. Walker has this very clean line, but it's deceptively simple, and I wouldn't fault anyone for thinking it was a quick style, but obviously that's not the case. Cory Walker is the type of creator like Mike Mignola who tortures himself over every stroke. After finishing Full House, I just thought to myself, gosh, I'd love to see more comics from this guy, but he's living that Amazon Prime Invincible life, working as creative consultant and lead character designer on the TV series, the second season of which will be dropping later this year. But I don't want him to be another Guy Davis. I want him back in comics. Also, I want Guy Davis back in comics, but I guess that Hollywood money is too dang tempting.
Just another reason to bring the Star Trek future to our present when there is no money and everyone is following their bliss.
Oh, yes. So, Lisa, I know you love Ryan Ottley's style, his vibe, his aesthetic. was it weird to have Cory Walker return for Full House for you? Like, did it throw you off?
100% it threw me off.
Did it? Yeah,
yes,
I thought
it did.
so.
It was totally like immersion bias, though, because when you're looking at one person's art for so many issues,
And then you have a dramatic shift.
and like for some reason, my initial reaction is always like, ugh, or like what? Ugh.
Change is bad.
I hate it. I'm uncomfortable. But honestly, it was just like a few pages in and you completely forget.
Yeah, I think it's only natural to react that way when you love something and then it changes. But on this podcast, we always talk about how change is necessary and change isn't inherently bad and you need to embrace change. But in rereading Full House, like this is probably like my third or fourth time, and I reread it twice before doing the podcast. It was on that reread where I just kind of like fell in love with Cory Walker all over again. And when you're just looking at Invincible and you're just keeping his style at the forefront and you kind of forget Ryan Ottley after a while when you're rereading these issues. And there is a fringe universe out there where Cory Walker was able to do the entire series. And I think that series would be very good. Not the same, but probably just as good.
That's not to say, though, that artists are interchangeable.
No, not at all.
We're looking at someone's heart song. It's clear that Cory Walker loves these characters. He's so expressive with them. He really immerses himself in their experience, as does Ryan Ottley. So it's just a matter of looking at these individuals through a slightly different lens.
And then honestly, like as Invincible exists right now with Cory Walker, Ryan Ottley, Cory Walker, it's awesome.
Yeah,
It's awesome. It's awesome. And I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. So we're going to get into Full House in a moment, but before we can do that, Lisa, we got to check in with our love expert.
Yes, for our third session with Mark and Eve, we are continuing with our love expert, Dr. Mark Brackett, using his book, Permission to Feel, Unlocking the Power of Emotions to help our kids, ourselves, and our society thrive. And we have been loving him, but I have been having creeping reservations about him.
Oh, no.
Dr. Brackett is a professor at the Yale Child Study Center and the founding director of the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. He is also the lead developer of Ruler, an evidence-based systematic curriculum for the societal and emotional learning for grades pre-K through 12. In our last session, we covered the R, U, and L of the Ruler skills. So this session, we're going to round it out with E and R. So these Ruler skills are the skills that it takes to have emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence isn't something that you are inherently born with. It's something that you have to build over time in a mindful way. So Brad.
Yes.
I know it's been a minute.
Uh-oh.
But pop quiz.
Oh, no.
What are the R, U, and L skills?
Wrong answers only. Raging.
Uh-huh.
Unionizing.
Ooh, we like that one.
WGA strong. And what was the other one? L? Laughing.
There you go. I love it. And if it was wrong answers only, you get 100% correct. I
Was
love
it
so
wrong
much.
answers only?
No, it wasn't initially, but I saw the panic in your face, and so yeah.
What are the R, U, and L?
So R stands for recognizing. So you have to recognize that an emotion is happening. U is understanding, so it's like getting to the bottom of why the emotion is happening. And L is labeling.
Right.
To identify with specificity what the emotion is. And to do that, we can use our 4-quadrant mood meter.
You would think that after spending so many hours editing the last couple of episodes, that would actually retain in my head. But it's been a minute, Lisa. It
has been.
We've done many creator conversations since the last Invincible episode.
And I have so been looking forward to the expressing emotions portion. I just want Mark Brackett to tell me it's okay to cry loudly in a public library.
And does he?
Not so much. Dr. Brackett says that E, expressing emotions, can be the scariest of the 5 letters because up until now, we have been working on a solo project. We've been working on our little sound booth that is our own brain, recognizing the emotion, understanding it, labeling it accurately. Expressing the emotion is now the moment when you reach out to another person like, do you want to collab on this? Do you want to pick up what I feel like putting down? And they can be like, no thanks. Dr. B refers to expressing emotions as a transaction between people, but it's kind of a gamble as well. The transaction might end with you both coming to a place of mutual understanding and our relationship coming closer, but it might not. And that's scary. We've already witnessed some of the scariness with Mark and Eve in the last session when Mark was withholding his emotions that he was trying to process on his own about his traumatic experience with Anissa. He feared what emotions it would bring out in his wife, and she could possibly reject him because of it, or like he wasn't sure like how culpable he was in that experience. It was a very like murky thing in his mind, and he thought that by keeping his emotions to himself, he was somehow sparing his partner.
And sparing himself as well, but it was just bottling up and it was going to erupt, and we saw how it erupted.
When we express our emotions, here's what we really want to get across. Here's what I feel and why. Here's what I want to happen next. Here's what I want from you right now. Dr. Mark Brackett makes it clear, though, that permission to feel isn't permission to let it all hang out. Because if we're all displaying our unfiltered emotions all of the time, that doesn't leave room for anyone else's emotions. It actually had me thinking about our Dick and Babs episodes about the Bowen family systems theory and the sponges. Do you remember the sponges, Brad?
I do remember the sponges.
Can you explain them to our listening audience?
Why would you do this to me, Lisa?
Because I feel like we're more interesting to listen to when we take turns talking.
I mean, I agree, but guess what? You've just caught me in a lie. I don't remember the sponges. I remember the term, the sponges, but I don't actually remember the sponges.
So
this is the second time you exposed me as somebody who just cares about the comics talk. That's not true, though.
Well, anybody else who's like you has already 15 seconds skipped past this portion. But the sponges is like, in this world, we're all living in emotion soup, and we're all the sponges.
Oh, so, yeah. And we soak it up.
And we soak up the emotions.
Yeah.
And so it's part of our job to process our emotions so that we can, in turn, soak up other emotions. Because we're all going to come to a time when we're overwhelmed, where we can't absorb anymore, and we depend on others
to wring us out.
Exactly.
See, I remembered it eventually.
That's very good, and I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
We also can't let it all hang out because we live in a society where not everybody is on board with the whole permission to feel thing. And we're often bound by nuanced display rules of when we can express our emotions and with whom. So we have to manage or even mask our emotions, but not too much, because too much is bad. The effort we use to manage our emotions on a daily basis is called emotional labor. And like any other type of labor, if we do it too often, it takes a toll. Sociologist Arlie Hochschild spent her career studying the effects of emotional labor in the workplace. Jobs that require long sustained emotional masking, people like nurses, kindergarten teachers, police officers, customer service jobs, have high instances of burnout, lower job satisfaction, and increased anxiety and depression. Do you remember back in the day when McDonald's had that, like, we guarantee your food with a smile?
Vaguely.
Where if you notice that you're going through the drive-thru, if the minimum wage worker doesn't smile at you, you get a free meal.
Gross. No, I don't remember that.
That was the time of McDonald's highest turnover and highest burnout.
Oh, I believe it.
Nobody can fake it all of the time.
No, that's awful.
Full disclosure, this is the first part of Permission to Feel where I'm kind of unsatisfied because the overall message of the section is expressing your emotions is risky because people can reject you, but you kind of have to do it anyway. And he also doesn't really explain what expressing your feeling looks like, other than explaining it with words.
Does he talk about what happens when you express your feelings and it does not go well for the other person?
No, no. Like, he doesn't even, so I did the Kindle equivalent of Control F, and he does not use the word crying, which is my number one concern in this chapter at all.
Interesting.
So, like, is the sum total of expression like just telling people your needs? Because a lot of times when I'm experiencing an emotion, I don't know what my needs are.
So Mark Brackett, he has the mood meter. He knows that recognizing emotions is important. He knows expressing emotions is important, but he just doesn't give you the tools of how to express and what to do when someone responds in any way to that expression.
No, he does have a long kind of self-congratulatory section on, like, okay. I can't remember if it was in the expressing or the regulating, which comes next, but he has all of these instances when somebody said something insensitive to him while he was doing a presentation, and how he's like, I could have really taken that person out by their knees by saying something really divisive, but instead I regulated the emotion and everything turned out okay, and my presentation.
So he gives you regulation. So his tip is regulation. So you
the
express the emotion, but you got to regulate that
emotion as well.
Okay.
And regulating
sounds incomplete.
To me, like, I was looking for something that really simplified the emotions process. As we were going through R, U, and L, I was like, oh, we're getting closer to a really easy system for me to figure out when and how to express my emotions. And then we get to the expressing portion, and he goes like, and this part's really hard, and it's never not going to be hard.
But maybe we can take the R, U, and L and then add it to one of our other previous love experts that does address expressing emotions.
Yeah, I'm not rejecting Dr. Mark Brackett whole cloth. I think that I need to do a little bit of introspection about my relationship with my emotions, because I'm like one of those people who just feels like I'm too much. You know what I mean? And I just wanted him to say, like, you're not too much. You're the individual who's actually doing the right thing, crying loudly in a public library.
So the cure's not here in Permission to Feel for you, or at least the cure that you're looking for.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So, like, there's no, like, plan of action and expression of, like, okay, it's time to express your emotions. Here's what you can do.
But we do agree that expressing your emotions is
important.
Better than bottling your emotions.
Because if you bottle your emotions, you're going to express them anyway in a way that is less mindful, or you're going to burn out and you're going to undermine your overall happiness, is the point. What he doesn't say, but was my overall takeaway for this portion of the book, is that it's really important to identify who your safe people are. For when you have an emotion, who can I go to? Yes. And it can be a different person for different types of situations.
I like that strategy.
You shouldn't go to the same person for everything. It's really important to diversify. Mark Brackett does say that there is some relief you can get on your own by writing down your emotions. There has been studies on that. But my heart goes out to those people who feel like they're in a situation where they don't have any safe people.
Yeah. And so it would be worth your time to invest in finding safe people.
Even if that means going anonymously online and finding an online community of people who might be able to identify with your experience.
There are also hotlines that you can call.
Absolutely, yes.
In Virginia, we have a mental health hotline, and let me look it up real quick. It's 1-866-903-3787. And if you go to Google, you can look up a mental health hotline in your state. And I would recommend using them.
And it doesn't have to be a crisis level.
No. It's you just want to reach out. They are there.
It does make me really mindful about trying to be a safe harbor for as many people as possible. And Dr. Brackett does have tips for that. So when someone comes to you with their emotions, you want to curb any behaviors that signal indifference. So closing off your body and not facing the person, or crossing your arms, or appearing restless or avoiding eye contact will make a person feel unsafe with their emotions around you. The message you want to convey is, I'm here for you and I'm not judging you. I want to understand and help you in the manner that you want to be helped. This may mean masking your own emotions to make space for the other person's emotions, which may be where the transactional aspect comes in. I think a lot of conflict and relationships can come from competing emotional space and saying, like, can you please check your feelings because I right now am having a feeling.
Yeah, and as we know, sometimes I'm like, Lisa, I don't have the spoons right now.
Right. This just reminds you that there is no clean answer for being a human.
Yeah.
And we're all looking to build our emotional intelligence skills, but we're going to mess up.
Yeah,
It's just going to happen. And Mark Brackett does give explicit permission to fail. Like, we're all just doing the best we can.
Permission to feel, permission to fail.
Exactly. So let's get to our regulating emotions. Dr. Brackett refers to regulation as the most complex and challenging of the 5 skills, even though we've been regulating and co-regulating our entire lives. Regulation is any time you make a choice to change your emotional state. So it can be said that these 4 volumes started with a huge instance of emotional regulation. Both Mark and Eve were tired of being in the red quadrant of the mood meter, frustrated, furious, stressed, enraged, with the direction Rex is taking the planet Earth, so they left in hopes that it could change the emotion. I think a more straightforward example of emotional regulation was when Mark was stuck back in time and he was masking all of the time to hide that he was from the future. He was sitting at the dinner table with his mom and his dad, and he just grew so frustrated and tired. So he flew up into the sky so he could do just some screaming and shouting. Like, that's emotional regulation. Co-regulation is when 2 people cooperate in order to change each other's emotions. Co-regulation actually happens every time 2 people are together. And it's the first regulation we learn as infants. So think of little infant Tera. Every time she was crying or fussy, her parents would soothe her by holding her and rocking and speaking to her in quiet, calm tones. That's emotional regulation. But most of us are doing our emotional regulation in sort of a willy-nilly sort of way, where we let things build up, we blow off steam, right? Permission to feel encourages us to regulate our emotions in a less habitual, less self-hating, more mindful way. Emotional regulation is not about stuffing the undesirable negative emotions so you never feel them, but rather assessing the proportion of the emotion with relation to the problem the emotion is alerting you to. And Dr. Brackett outlines some strategies that might help you when you need to wrangle some unruly emotions so that you can think more clearly. Number 1 is mindful breathing.
I like this one.
There are lots of suggestions for mindful breathing exercises online and even like expensive apps. The most important thing is that you are first and foremost thinking about the breath. 2 is forward-looking strategies. If there's a situation that you anticipate will make you feel an undesirable emotion, adjust the circumstance so that the impact will be lessened. Eve has a turbulent relationship with her parents, so she makes the visits short and she has a hard out. That is forward-looking strategies.
Smart.
3 is attention shifting. We've talked about this strategy a lot on CBCC, but it's about thinking outside of yourself and thinking about yourself having the emotion in third person. Dr. B cites studies where the subject is exposed to disturbing images or are asked to recall upsetting memories, and the subjects who refer to the experience in third person has their discomfort decreased by half. So it might feel silly to go like, Brad Gullickson is frustrated right now, but the dividends are huge. So just be a cheeseball and do it.
I love that phrase. That's my motto. Be a cheeseball and do it.
That's going to be on a t-shirt. Elliot, get on that. 4 is cognitive reframing, or as others refer to it, reframing the narrative.
Something we've also talked about on this podcast a lot.
Yeah. This technique is often used in CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. It's taking a stressful situation and practicing seeing it in a more positive light. So Mark has had to do a ton of reframing in his relationship with his dad, because initially the betrayal was enormous. But over time, Mark has realized that it was an extension of how Nolan was raised as a Viltrumite, and also he has grown so much.
He has applied a lot of empathy towards Nolan, and Nolan has applied a lot of empathy towards, well, Mark and all of humanity.
I practice this a lot on the road, where in the past, you know, if someone cuts me off, I go like, clearly this person is a selfish a-hole and they don't care about me at all and they're trying to teach me a lesson and blah, blah, blah. But now I go like, man, that person must be so distracted and under so much pressure that they didn't even notice me. I hope that person's day is going to go better. These strategies can be used to regulate yourself, but you can also use them to help calm down another person without explicitly stating, I'm going to cognitively reframe you now. You can just start thinking about your own breathing and work forward-looking, attention-shifting, cognitive reframing stuff into the conversation. And if you do that in a mindful way, you'll help discharge a volatile situation, hopefully. Yeah, it's worth a shot. But Dr. Brackett points out that there can be a dark side to any one of these regulation strategies, and none of them are going to work 100% of the time. For example, we've already mentioned Mark avoiding Anissa as a forward-looking strategy, but it's not going to be enough for him to deal with the emotional trauma of what she did to him. So, like, we can't use these strategies to just continuously run from our feelings.
But reframing, I think, you know, taking a moment at the halftime and reassessing the situation and re-strategizing, like that's what life is.
Yeah, like, we're not finding a solution, which I so desperately want. What we are doing is building a tool belt and a toolbox. And yeah. And I mean, maybe I should find it comforting that emotions are hard and even somebody with a doctorate doesn't have all of the answers.
Yes.
In the session with Mark and Eve, I think it will be interesting to monitor when they choose to express and when they choose to mask their emotions.
Ooh, fun.
And we can also discuss how their different co-regulation strategies are influencing their choices and also influencing their familial relationship as Mark, Eve, and Tera.
But before we can do that, Lisa, we gotta get into some words of affirmation.
Affirmations!
For first-time listeners, the words of affirmation are our way to give back to our new and upgrading Patreon subscribers. We curate and use these ourselves, and we're more than happy to pass them on to you. This week we have one new patron, and it's our friend Brian Young. Yes, finally, after years, we've convinced Brian to join our Patreon, and I believe he did it primarily because of our full spoilers review of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So naturally, our words of affirmation for him have to come from Into the Spider-Verse.
Plus, there are so many good quotes in this. It was hard to choose just one, but we did it.
All right, Lisa. Let's get into that headspace.
Let's take that deep breath Dr. B was talking about. Brian Young. I see this spark in you. Whatever you choose to do with it, you'll be great. I got a little choked up, not gonna lie. I love my friend Brian.
Brian's so good. Brian's so good. There are actually so many words of affirmation in the 2 Spider-Verse films, and probably in the 3rd Spider-Verse film when it comes out in March of next year. That affirmation right there actually was tweeted out as a word of affirmation from the Across the Spider-Verse Twitter account.
They know what they got.
Yeah, they do. They do. Of course, we don't expect all of you listening to support us through the Patreon. There are many other ways you can do so. Liking and sharing this episode is one of them. Writing a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts actually does a lot and takes us so much further into the Apple Podcast world. We really appreciate that. That being said, I'm also really proud of what we've been doing with our Patreon. We've been putting out so many episodes in the last couple of weeks. We had Neil Clyde, the writer of The Phoenix Chase, come on for another bonus creator conversation. We're doing our Sleepwalking Through Sandman series. We're almost done with the kindly ones. 75 issues of Sandman. We are doing 75 episodes on those 75 issues. We also just did not 1, not 2, but 3 Across the Spider-Verse reviews. Full spoilers, no spoilers, and 1 on the Burger King Spider-Verse Whopper. Yes. So if you want some extra comic book couples counseling content in your life, join that Patreon. $1 gets you all of it.
Yeah, that's true. But more dollars gets you more stuff.
Yeah. $1 gets you all the episodes. More dollars get you some Slack community, some goodness there, some
gifties
care
in the
packages.
mail.
Yeah, we've just printed out a bunch of new Make Mine CBCC buttons, and those will be going to our patrons first.
Yeah.
And now we got to pull Mark and Eve out of the waiting room, bring them into session, put them on our couch. We're talking about Invincible Full House issues 127 through 132, published by Image Comics through the Skybound Entertainment imprint between April 2016 and February 2017. The comic was written by Robert Kirkman, penciled by Cory Walker, colored by Nathan Fairbairn, and lettered by Russ Wooten. Here's the basic plot, taken off of Goodreads. Mark has returned from the past to a very different future. Now he has to pick up the pieces of his life and try to put them back together. Invincible co-creator Cory Walker returns to the book to set the stage for the next chapter of Invincible's life. And also the end of Invincible. It's so close. Pretty basic plot synopsis, Lisa. Straight and to the point.
It's always feast or famine with these plot synopses. Either they give you way too much and they give the whole story away, or they tell you nothing and then you have to read the whole book, which isn't a bad problem to have.
The nice thing about Full House is that it does start immediately after Reboot. Like the first panel is the next panel after the last one, right? And the first panel of this trade gives you an opportunity to recognize some emotions.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on and a lot of co-regulation going on as well.
So Mark is obviously in shock. He is weeping. Tera is now, I would say, 5 years old?
Yeah.
About 5 years has gone by since the last issue, or since he went off to Reboot Land. And, I think that the first couple of pages, Lisa, are pretty satisfying as far as that shock. Like the page turn, the second page, that big splash of Mark weeping and hugging Tera, and Tera taking it so well,
Yeah.
Like she seems like, well, Dad's back. That's great. I've heard about this guy. And, Eve looks pretty emotional as well. But then, after 3 pages, they seem really okay with everything.
Right. Well, I think that their life has been one of many huge adjustments, and this is just one more. But
they've had practice, is what you're saying.
Exactly. But the person who I'm kind of impressed / confused by is Tera. And we'll see throughout this book, she is pretty unflappable. It makes me wonder, is she stuffing her emotions? Because her parents are constantly going through this melodrama. So she sees her dad for the first time. She recognizes that he's upset. And she immediately goes into comforting mode.
Right.
And then her parents are crying and embracing and Tera is just kind of watching.
So if we go back all the way to when this comic first was published in 2016, and I was reading it month to month, as I slowly progressed through this arc, I was extremely worried that Tera was bad.
Oh, interesting.
Because the Viltrumites, they have issues, right? They have a complicated origin themselves, and we see Oliver struggling with some morality. Maybe we're going to talk about that. There's a lot to unpack there with Oliver in this arc, and obviously Nolan's done some heinous stuff, and it just seemed right to me. Like the next tragedy would be not that Mark comes back to his child 5 years later and he's missed so much of her childhood. It's that in not being there, he wasn't able to properly raise Tera, and Tera is quote unquote bad. Now, I won't say what that's like beyond this arc, because Lisa, again, has not read all of Invincible. She still hasn't gotten to the last two trades.
This is as far as I've gotten.
But that was a concern for me. Was that ever a concern for you reading Full House?
It didn't occur to me one time.
Okay, yeah, all right. You now look like you have a concerned expression
now
on
I'm
your
concerned.
face.
I would hate for that to happen.
But don't you think that would also kind of make sense too? Like it would not be surprising.
What a little automaton she is.
Yeah.
When it comes to
because she's not quite a sociopath in this arc, but she does kind of. She does use masks, it seems.
She's super even-tempered, considering the circumstances. But I think that maybe she might take after her dad. I feel like Mark in this volume is, considering what he's going to, shockingly even-tempered. And he has the expectation of, I'm going to have my emotions by myself because I don't want to be a further burden on my girls.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead in the story already, but knowing where this goes, and eventually Eve reveals that she has had a relationship with another person after Mark went away. Again, it's been 5 years. You can't really fault her for finding love after Mark, because effectively Mark had died, right? But that storyline and the complicated feelings around that storyline sort of take over the emotional arc of Full House. And I almost wish it didn't happen, because this event, these 3 pages right here at the beginning of Full House, are so major. If they had happened in my life, your life, it would take years of recovery.
It would be a major disruption.
But Eve's relationship with that other person kind of distracts from this initial trauma.
I think that over the next couple of pages, we're going to talk about how Mark is desperately just trying to immerse himself and just trying to catch up.
He's kind of repeating what he was doing when he first got here.
Yes.
When he first left Earth. But now Eve has had 5 years to become, this is her home.
Right.
She's adapted now.
Yeah.
And now Mark has to readapt.
Exactly. And I think that he is using that kind of aggressive adaptation mode to kind of put some of those emotions on the back burner. But we'll also see him processing and having conversations. But I think because Mark is stuffing and Tera, I suspect, is stuffing, it puts Eve in this place of kind of acting out, and she becomes the one with big uncontrollable emotions. I think in order to go hey, you guys, shouldn't we be feeling?
Yeah, it's also complicated because they have a child, right? So they cannot emotionally break down too much. Mark has already probably shown too many feelings, or at least in his estimation, he's shown too many feelings to Tera, and he's been comforted by Tera. So Eve and Mark have to reel back the terror that they might be experiencing because they got to get this kid to bed. And Tera being either a sociopath or just a child.
I don't think she's a sociopath. I don't want to put that vibe out there.
So, I mean, like, but aren't all children sociopaths?
Yeah,
Lisa?
a little bit. They're myopic.
Like, she has the ability to go to bed pretty quickly after dad comes back. You know, she's taking this so well. It's not a big deal. Just another day in the life of Tera. Off to sleep I go. And Mark and Eve go to the couch to process this a little bit. And again, process it shockingly smoothly. And Mark reveals how he's feeling guilty because in the past he had an opportunity to make the world better. But if he tried to do that, he would lose Tera, he would lose his relationship with Eve, and that's why he ditched Reboot Land. And he's confessing this to Eve. And I was nervous. How is Eve going to take this? But Eve's like, you did what you had to do.
I think in the scene on the couch, Eve is doing the thing of making room for Mark's emotions. So she's going to be a little bit more masking in order for him to express himself. And we see her go through the ruler skills. She recognizes an emotion is happening. It's pretty big. It's pretty obvious. And she asks, "Are you okay?" She immediately seeks understanding. And the way that Mark sums up the lessons he learned from Reboot is, I learned I'm not a hero. And that is one of the major themes of this volume.
Yeah, and learning that is torturing him.
Right. Because
or at least not learning that, but believing that.
We think of heroism, particularly superheroism, as a quantity game. What is the thing that's going to save the absolute most amount of people?
What have you done for me lately?
Right, but like Mark is a hero for Tera. And Mark is a hero for all of the children who came after. Like, that's the inherent problem with going into the past to fix the present, is that the present contains so many fruits of that terrible past.
Yeah, I would also say that heroism is a perspective game, right? Like, what, you could judge Mark poorly for making that decision.
And you might think that you would have made a different decision.
Right, and there are people within that past that were deeply affected that would see Mark's choice as a villainous choice. And I couldn't necessarily fault them, but I also can't necessarily fault Mark for what he does because, one, I have never experienced that type of decision before. And if you asked me to choose the existence of our relationship, Lisa, over a better planet Earth than the one we currently have, I don't want to make that choice. It would be a very hard choice, and I'm afraid, like, I would take my selfish choice, and I would choose you over utopian Earth. It's just, heroism is a perspective game,
right.
And we're going to see more acts of heroism in Invincible, and we're going to see more acts of selfishness in Invincible. The rubber banding of morality is what this comic is all about, and is what most superhero comics are all about.
And, part of me is kind of going, it's totally fine for Mark to think of himself as not a hero. He's not just because he has these extraordinary abilities doesn't oblige him to be one kind of person or another kind of person, or oblige him to sacrifice a family life.
But he does need to work out the emotions that he's experiencing right now. And if you look at this scene on the couch, and Eve takes it all in, and Eve says, I guess, the right things for this moment. But that final panel on that page where she has Mark's head on her shoulder, it is a wordless panel. Her eyes are open, and she is now processing everything that Mark has actually said. And how does she really feel in this moment? She looks pretty, overwhelmed, concerned, and rightfully so.
I think also her expression might have something to do with the previous panel ending with "we're ... together. I think there are also some infidelity feelings. Not that, you know, like, she thought he was dead, but infidelity feelings, like some kind of guilt going on with that. But I love what she says about, like, when he's kind of spiraling and going like, I'm such a screw up. I can't fix it. I don't even know where to begin processing this. And she said, start here, start with me.
Yeah.
And I think that method of, like, taking the overwhelmedness and going like, we can do this one thing. Right now, we can fix what's going on between us and repair our relationship.
And that's really how they approach this going forward. I mean, they really are living in the moment. And the next day they wake up and it's time to take Tera to class. And Mark gets to observe how, like, at home, at peace, Eve is on this planet that at one point she was violently resisting.
Right. She has definitely reframed her narrative when it comes to living on an alien planet. It is now, like, less alien to her. The last time Mark saw her, she was saying things like, I will never have an alien babysitter.
Right.
I hate this place.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. But now that she has fully immersed herself, she is part of the scene. She is interacting with her neighbors, and now they're no longer scary aliens to her.
And now Eve is kind of the alien to Mark.
Yeah.
You know? And his expression on this page as they're strolling through the street is interesting to observe. You know, he looks concerned. He looks impressed. He looks like he's got a little bit of pride in there. He's shocked. You know, he's going through a lot. Mm-hmm. But none of it's said. It's all done through Cory Walker's art, and Cory Walker's killing it.
We think of intimacy so much as, like, having knowledge about the other person. I know everything Brad did to get into this chair this morning, you know? And that constant exchange of information feels like, well, that information is the thing that deepens our relationship. Mark is missing a lot of that stuff.
Good point.
And there's just kind of no catching up on everything that happened in the last 5 years.
But again, he kind of just rolls with it because that's what Mark does.
He does. Because he doesn't want to be the problem. Can you imagine disappearing for 5 years and then coming back and finding out that everyone has learned how to function without you, and how are you supposed to fit back in? That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a really scary thought. And again, I'm really impressed with how Mark deals with it.
Yeah. Alan, on the other hand, has not figured out how to function without Mark, and Thragg has not slowed down just because our main character was stuck in the past.
I got to give some points to Alan that he has managed to keep Thragg at bay.
Yeah.
It's kind of impressive that Thragg hasn't made his move during this period of in time.
What the move that he has made is spawning.
Yeah.
The universe doesn't stop just because you're not looking at someone. He has been making babies crazy.
Yeah, he's a factory.
Yeah.
Those poor women.
And the more the coalition has their back turned to them, the more soldiers he gets to put inside those arachnid alien people.
Yeah, the Thraxans.
The Thraxans. So when Mark goes to have his reunion with Alan immediately tries to get Mark back in the game, back in the war against Thragg. And Alan and Mark have always had this complicated relationship.
And they've had this conversation several times
so
before.
many times. Yeah. Mark wants to continue to be Alan's friend. Alan wants to continue to be Mark's friend. But their visions for each other's future are very different.
Yeah, Mark wants to take some time. You know, he tells Alan, like, I just went through some stuff and I need to figure it out. And Alan's like, okay, well, let's throw you a party.
Right. So Mark, I think, does a good job of throwing down a hard boundary. He goes like, guess what? I'm never coming back to work for you. I'm going to be a family man. He is already resentful of the time he lost fighting already. He wants this other thing. Alan really wants to respect that and be the good guy.
Oh, because Alan does have a brain. He does understand that losing 5 years of your life, you're going to need some R&R afterward.
What I think I really am trying to say is I don't think that Alan is being manipulative. I honestly think that Alan is Mark's friend, and Alan wants the best for Mark. He just has this overwhelming problem.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, if we were following his story in Invincible, would be going through the same emotional rubber banding, morality rubber banding as Mark has been going through.
Right.
And, you know, he is doing his best, and he's doing a great job considering everything that's going on. At the party, though, you know, when they're like, okay, well, let's just have a little cocktail hour, not a big deal. Let's just relax. Let's get the family back together. That first panel on that page of the party, you see that so much has evolved, continuing Eve's adaptation of her new life. Her and Haluma look pretty chummy. Haluma has a couple babies with Oliver now, and Eve is, you know, being very like, oh, cute, love these little guys. And, you know, their relationship was so antagonistic the last time that we
Right.
saw them. So when you see a panel like this, it really just underscores the horror of those 5 years lost for Mark.
Yeah.
And Mark can't really handle being at this party, so he goes out onto the balcony, and his brother Oliver, sporting a very dashing Viltrumite mustache.
You see, to me, he looks like Freddie Mercury / like with like a dash of Clark Gable.
Yeah, which I would say is dashing, Lisa.
Yeah,
A
oh,
dashing
yeah.
mustache. He's a fetching gentleman. This conversation between Oliver and Mark is really complicated. It's
Yeah.
very complicated. Again, Mark can't contain the well of sadness that is bubbling below the surface, and he bursts into tears, and now it's time for Oliver's shoulder to get some work in.
Yeah. I feel like Oliver starts on the right foot when it comes to ruler skills. He goes for understanding, and of course Mark, instead of labeling, goes the opposite direction and goes like, I'm fine, which we've all done, right? Like sobbing while telling someone everything is A-okay.
Then Oliver kind of mocks him.
Yeah, Oliver
Like a brother.
emasculates him
Yeah.
and calls him, we don't approve of this, a giant pussy for having
Emotions.
But is that teasing? Is he distracting? I don't know.
Well, what makes it complicated for me is what we know is going on behind the scenes with Oliver. He is now we don't learn it in this sequence here, but he is in conversation with Thragg. He is plotting with Thragg. And I have a lot of questions about this turncoat situation with Oliver. And we don't necessarily need to talk about them right now. We can get to it in a moment. But this scene, when you read it with that knowledge, is way more complicated than it is, or than it already seemed to be. Like, it already seemed pretty darn complicated.
I think we can talk about it now.
Okay.
To me, I think it is purposefully really
Vague.
I think it depends greatly on how much you've ever trusted Oliver, how you frame this narrative. Because you could see it as Oliver is a Viltrumite, and he has always had a lot of Viltrumite pride.
Yep.
And
he's had some Viltrumite aggression.
And so he would side with Thragg in order to broaden the legacy of the Viltrumite Empire. But also, he has been working for Alan, and he is not a guy who likes to follow orders. And Alan has been pretty passive when it comes to really getting close to Thragg. And
Taking action. After the last attack, they've been on the defense.
And since Oliver was a child, he was like, okay, when people are not looking, I'm just going to take care of it myself. So I can see Oliver going like, Alan is not getting this done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be really clever and reach out to Thragg myself and pretend that I am on his side, but then do the
switcheroo.
The switcheroo, the double agent thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a generous reading of the arc. And the way his arc ends in Full House with spoilers. I love warning people of spoilers at this point.
We're going to say it by the end of this episode.
Oliver is killed, right? Before we learn what happens. And so really Oliver's storyline in Full House operates like a Rorschach test
Yes.
for the reader.
Yes.
And I think depending on your own feelings, you can decide, wherever you fall is not necessarily right or wrong. Personally, I feel like it is a double agent situation.
So you agree with me?
Well,
that's what I feel. That's what I feel. I feel
Okay.
like Oliver was trying to do the double agent thing. He has become a father. He has a greater sense of urgency for the safety of the universe.
And he's doing, the Grayson thing of, I got this.
Right.
Mark's no longer here, so I've set this plan in motion because I got to do what Mark couldn't do, and what Alan can't do, I can do it this way. That's how
a real questioner. If we want to go to the 4 tendencies, he's a real questioner. He doesn't feel like he needs to answer to anyone if what he's doing is justified in his own brain.
But there are still 2 trade paperbacks to come, Lisa.
Oh,
there
no.
might be a definitive answer to the
really?
question. I'm not going to say. But that's where we are right now. And that's where I was when I first read it. I came down on the side of this is a double agent situation.
Right. I think for Mark's long-term mental health, it would be good for him to frame the narrative of his brother in a flattering light.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, poor Oliver. The death, too, is just so graphic.
And right in front of Tera.
Yeah. Good luck, Tera. So after the party, Eve and Mark come to the decision that they need some away time. They got to get off this planet, and they need to concentrate on being a family. They have to do the things that they missed when Mark was away off in Reboot Land.
Eve has built a little resort, a little oasis on Kolthak.
It's gorgeous.
It is beautiful. And I think that for the time being, running away from their problems a little bit and really focusing on reestablishing those connections of intimacy and really working on being a family again is really smart. But I think, and if we were going Mark Brackett terms, we would say this is pretty forward thinking. They're overwhelmed, so they're going to go away and then hopefully re-enter society.
It's a plan.
Exactly. I think it's a really smart idea. But they do have a history of running away from problems. It has generally led to their problems catching up with them in a really ugly way.
And then being saved by a narrative thing.
Right. So to me, I think that it would have been smart of them to establish a hard out. I don't know. It's hard to judge their.
You can't judge them. You can't judge
their decisions. But as Mark Brackett would say, any emotional regulation taken too far can be a bad thing. You have to process the emotions eventually.
Lisa, I know you hate it when we're in session with a couple and then I step outside of the session, outside of the comic book, but I just want to take a moment here in this beautiful space to recognize Cory Walker's design and not just of the house and the landscape and the flowers, but the costuming. Eve and Mark look great.
Yeah.
Their looks are gorgeous.
I love the outfit that Eve is wearing when Mark returns from the past, where she's wearing that kind of midriff flowy thing.
All of Eve's outfits in this arc are top tier.
Granted, her shapes are very pleasing, so anything she wears is going to look...
It's still a Western superhero comic, right? I also think that the sequential storytelling of this sequence is exceptional, where Mark goes in to kiss Eve, Eve pulls away, Mark is worried, mad, then he tries to take back the initial anger, and then Eve reveals on the page turn a big splash that there was someone else.
Right.
That moment, this moment when they finally get there, like you're saying, they're running away from their problems, but their problems are still there. And now that she's away from society, she can confess what has been eating her up.
Right. She's been bottling this, making room for Mark's emotions, but now it's time to to get down and dirty and talk about what's really happened.
But just from again, stepping outside of the counseling session, from a pure comic book storytelling standpoint, these pages are like unbeatably good.
Yeah. I feel like you can really see Mark's mental, emotional process.
Like the whole, throughout this book, on one page, you see Mark just go through a wave of feelings.
Right.
Cory Walker can take all these characters through so many emotions in such a short span of time, and it never feels extreme or unreal.
I'd like to talk about these 2 pages in detail a little bit from Mark's perspective.
Okay.
So he thinks he's having this nice afternoon with his girls at their new
Right.
getaway. And then he goes in for a kiss and he's rejected. And I think that he has sensed Eve being a little bit distant since he's come back.
Yeah, which reflects his distance in the last arc over the Anissa stuff. Or not Reboot, but Modern Family.
Right, so it brings up all of those same traumas of, oh, I must be disgusting now because of my history. He has gone through this experience that makes him feel very rejectable. Right? When she rejects him in that moment, I just wonder, is he thinking like, does she not love me anymore? Have I changed in some way? Has she changed in some way? And I wonder if when he finds out that she was with someone else, if that's not something of a little bit of a relief. This is like a weed in my garden kind of thought, but I imagine part of him is going, oh, thank God. It's not my fault. It's not something that I did or something that was my responsibility.
Yeah, I wonder. We don't ever get access to his internal dialogue.
But we do get access to his behavior following this point, where he really works very hard to withhold judgment from her, because I feel like he feels like he has a lot of things he too can be judged for.
Yeah. The issue ends on that. Well, it doesn't end on that cliffhanger. It lets Eve's revelation sit there, and then we move into Oliver having conversations with Thragg in his throne room with just a tiny fraction of his children army.
I love the idea, though, of like when Thragg is in a Zoom meeting, he's like, okay, I want to look cool, so I'm going to place the camera way far away, and then I'm going to have my posse around me. Somebody get the cape!
That's a flex.
I'm about to do a Zoom!
Thragg is always flexing. You think Thragg ever takes off the Battle Beast cape? I do not.
He does when he fights.
Oh, that's
because he doesn't want to get blood on it. Yeah. Can you imagine the dry cleaning?
So then the next issue, oh my God, we are only in the second issue. We're going to have to speed things up a little bit.
I was afraid of that. But it always, there's so much setup.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about it.
It's going to be a long episode. It's okay. The next issue begins with Thragg again attacking an alien world and trying to get the attention of Alan's Federation. Mm-hmm. But then we return immediately to what I would say is the panel right after Eve's reveal. So I don't think we miss any time between Eve saying there was somebody else and Eve explaining to Mark, what does she say? His name was Kubion. Telia introduced us. We weren't together very long. He didn't ... You'd been gone for 4 years, and he's like, you don't have to. You don't have to explain yourself, because Mark also understands.
He understands logically, and I think also he doesn't want to know the details.
Yeah.
And
I would be the same.
I would be the same too. And I think that Brad doesn't even want to talk about my dating history. Which
No.
I don't really want to talk about
Lisa
either.
knew no boys before me. None.
Yeah.
She knew a few boys before me. It's okay. I've had 16 years to get used to it.
That's right. Happy anniversary, by the way.
Yeah, date anniversary, June 4th.
Yeah. But I just wonder how Mark not wanting to know the details and Eve not really necessarily wanting to hurt him with the details kind of undermines the understanding process. So this should logically be a huge, and it is an ongoing conversation where this this subject is going to be picked up and put down and picked up and put down like a hot rock. You know what I mean? But Mark kind of stops the conversation on his terms, saying
but
it's okay, I understand. And she goes, and then we have this embrace where she says a little tiny thank you for understanding, and him saying I love you no matter what, but they're both staring off into the middle distance.
They now have that expression that Eve had when they were on the couch at the beginning of the first issue, where they're just like, okay, things are known.
Right.
Now let's process. And we jump from them, trying to, process all that stuff to Tera and her little education robot, doing some lessons. Tera not wanting to do the lessons, the robot doing its best job.
There's a lot of ongoing tension. Like, we could do a whole separate episode about Mark's relationship with Eddie, the robot. And
thank you, Eddie. I forgot the name.
And Eddie having their educational priorities versus Mark really wanting to have some daddy-daughter time.
And so Mark leaves Eve to go find Tera, interrupts the education, steals Tera away from Eddie, and let's go flying. Let's go fly together. And Tera's excited about that, but Mark flies too fast, and it hurts.
Right.
It hurts poor
It scares
Tera's
her.
skin.
I don't think she's hurt in that moment. Like, we find out later, she doesn't like to fly with Nolan either. She's afraid of flying.
Oh, yeah. Why did I think it hurts?
Because it hurts later when he's running away from the Viltrumites.
Also,
and she's like he's like in the upper atmosphere. And
I just saw The Flash. And there's a scene that's sort of reminiscent to it where it does hurt.
Oh, okay.
when you carry somebody at super speed, it does hurt. That's what I was actually thinking about.
I can imagine. But, I mean, she is half Viltrumite.
Yeah. So she's got a fear. She's got a phobia of heights. So Mark takes her very low to the ground. That is like the cutest panel ever, where they're hovering, where they're flying maybe 2 feet off of the ground. I love it.
And she looks like super worried. But I think that Tera is like hyper aware of her dad's feelings and how fragile he is, where I think she feels like she has more of a grandpa relationship with Nolan, where she feels like she can be a little bit more honest with her needs.
Yep.
Nolan. We can talk about that later.
Then smash cut to tentacle porn on the next page.
Right, which if we're going to skip anything, it could be that.
Yeah, Talia and Alan going to Bone Zone. Then we're back to a scene with Mark and Tera drawing, having a little daddy-daughter crayon time.
I feel like in these scenes between Mark and Tera is old enough to kind of teach Mark how she likes to be parented.
Yes.
Which I think is so sweet, where she goes like, I want to read with daddy, and this is how I like to be read to. I read a page, you read a page.
Yeah, and kids do that. I remember doing that with my dad all the time. Like,
right.
This is the story I want to be read. Ooh, you're reading this wrong? This is how you do it. Now do it.
Yeah. And Mark is like super receptive to that. And of course, Tera has the one book that she likes to be read all of the time. And it is Opple Doppel. And it's about this character named Barga, who is sad because their friend Opple or Doppel, I can't remember the details, is missing, right? And that is the plot of this story. And we get this really sweet scene of Mark, Tera, and Eve all taking turns reading these pages. And then Eve gets to this page that says, as sad as she was looking for Doppel, Barga refused to quit because she was a strong Opple. Mark gets this faraway look, and she's like, Mark, it's your turn to read. And
Mark sees himself.
But no, he sees Eve, because Eve is Barga, he is Opple, but Eve stopped looking for her Doppel. Right? And she slept with a really sexy purple man named Kubion.
When I say Mark sees himself, I mean Mark sees the situation that he's living in Opple Doppel.
Right. His problems become the meta commentary to everything that is happening.
In true Invincible fashion, we immediately cut away from this sequence. We have to pause for the emotional continuation of it with Alan back on his home world, and he is attacked. He is betrayed by his own political party, and they set off a bomb, and it blows him to Kingdom Come. And you might actually think that he's dead in that moment. He's not. He survives it. He's very sturdy. And then after that, we cut back to Mark and Eve dealing with Mark's feelings, having just completed and seen himself in Opple Doppel.
To me, I feel like this conversation is the crux of the ongoing conflict, emotional conflict between Mark and Eve, where Eve notices that he is having an emotion. He's kind of going inside himself. He's
brooding.
He's brooding. And she says, "You're upset about it, aren't you?" The subtext of that sentence being, "You're upset at me. You're upset with me." And Mark says, "Yeah, of course I'm upset. I can be upset about you being with someone else and still see that you did nothing wrong and shouldn't apologize for it. Like, I feel bad, but you don't have to." She's like, "That's not fair. I know that you're upset, and I'm just going to like, ha ha ha, go on with life."
But the emotional experience is not fair.
I think what she wants is for Mark to be mad at her so that she can feel like she has been punished for what she did, and he's refusing to give that to her.
Yeah. She's experiencing self-loathing, a sense of failure, a sense of not waiting, like she should have done. Like she's regret. She's experiencing regret.
She's experiencing regret, and she thinks that the answer is for Mark to be mad at her, and then things can be okay. So coming up, she's going to be doing some pretty rash things that I would say would have been previously out of Eve's character and in Mark's character. We're experiencing a little bit of a role reversal through this conflict. But of course, Mark immediately changes the conversation and goes I'm not just upset about that. Like, there's 1,000 other things that I'm worried about.
Yeah,
right?
And then the final page of this issue is above Earth, in orbit of Earth. We see a massive battle. We see Robot, and smack dab in the center is Nolan. So there is something happening on Earth that is major. But since we're in session with Mark and Eve, we're not really going to focus on any of the Earth stuff, what's going on between Nolan and Robot. We're going to stick with Mark and Eve. And the next scene for them is they're in the hospital visiting Alan, who did survive his little bit of political betrayal, but he's just like a torso.
Yeah. But he assures us it's worse than it looks. But I do think that it is an injury worthy of a bunch of people coming to visit him. Don't you agree?
Yeah, totally. Including Kubion and Telia.
Which is awkward. And Kubion immediately offers to leave. And Eve is totally bristling. And she's like, "No, we'll leave." And Kubion is like, "That's fine. Can we just talk? Can we just have a discussion?" And not in front of Mark is the implication. And she's like, "Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of my husband." And what Kubion wants to do is make a last-ditch effort for Eve. And he says essentially like, there was a lot of love there, and I think that we could still make it work.
Yeah, and when Eve starts to hear him try to detail what had gone down between them, she clocks him.
She does, and Tera is thrilled.
She loves it.
By the way.
And so then Oliver and Mark have a moment together while, I guess, Eve, Kubion, Telia all take care of the stuff.
Right, and Mark says, I have no hard feelings for him, but it's nice to know where I stand. Like that I am the one that she loves.
He feels good.
She doesn't seem at all conflicted with whom she should be with.
Mark just got the satisfaction of Eve clocking Kubion, so he's high as a kite. He loves it.
But Telia takes out her metaphorical scissors and just snips his kite string and says, "Eve did not choose you over Kubion. They were very much in love, but in our culture, we don't really rear our young the way that you guys do. We don't really care that much about kids. So Eve technically chose Tera over Kubion, not you." Mark goes like, it's okay. I want to know what went on, like if they were actually in love. But I also, maybe this knowledge I'm not comfortable with. Oliver goes in and goes like, you know what, Telly is the worst. Do not listen to her.
Little bro.
But like talking about Eve for a little bit, I feel like if she was in a little bit more emotionally secure place, I don't think that she would have
clocked
Kubion.
Yeah.
I think she would have just left.
Yeah.
But because she has all of this unprocessed discomfort, it's coming out as violence.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is that after this sequence, we don't get another conversation between Mark and Eve. They do the thing where they got to keep moving.
Because they've got Tera and they have a life to get back to.
And what they do is something I think is a little surprising is they go back to Earth, or at least the moon base, Nolan's moon base.
They previously established that they had not heard from Mark's parents in a long
because
time.
They're busy. We saw above orbit a lot of warring going on.
So I think they're just curious how things are going back at home.
I love the reunion between Mark and Nolan. When Nolan is flying back into the moon base, he enters, he goes into a room, and that smile that he expresses when he immediately sees his son and loses his words is really precious. And then that mighty Viltrumite bear hug that he gives Mark as Tera is playing with Grandma.
I think it's so sweet. And I think that we get a little glimpse into Mark's upbringing where Tera goes like, my daddy is strong like you. And when he flies me, he goes slow. So I don't get scared. And Nolan says, I want you to be strong. That's why I scare you. So he goes like, he is very much an advocate of tough love.
Nolan's still Nolan.
Yeah, he still thinks that he really did a bang-up job with Mark.
And then we get a nice conversation between father and son.
A nice conversation where Mark is like, how could you be friends with Rex?
Yeah.
I guess nice in that they are not choking each other and getting each other all bloody and stuff.
Again, just as things are getting like, let's get real, let's talk about it, that conversation is interrupted because Eve has found Anissa and she does to her what she did to Kubion. She takes her out.
She is lashing out at her using full powers, right? She's manifested this huge platform brick thing that she's dropping on Anissa.
And Mark goes in to stop her, and Eve doesn't want to hear it. And when Eve pushes back on Mark, that's when Nolan realizes that something has happened between Anissa and Mark. And Nolan picks Anissa up by her throat and says, like, what did you do to my son?
And Mark replies,
nothing.
She didn't do anything.
Don't worry about it.
I don't blame Eve for having this intense rage against Anissa for what she did. But I think Eve in this case is crossing a boundary of Mark's. On the next page, he essentially says, like, I don't want to open this can of worms with my dad because my dad also has a lot on his plate. But I think that she's coming from this place of she has this deep felt guilt, and she believes that people who do wrong things should be punished.
Well, I don't even know if she's thinking
punishment
that way,
I don't
right?
think
It's like she sees Anissa and it's like, it's go time.
But I think that self-conscious thing is going on where she could have gone like, oh my God, Anissa's here. I'm going to avoid this situation.
Right, but because of all the trauma that she has experienced since Mark has gotten back, all this self-loathing, all this self-anxiety, all this regret, like she's lashing out.
She's taking it out.
She's not even lashing out. She's like, she's lost the ability to regulate.
Exactly. And I think she's trying to be an example for Mark. Like, I've done a bad thing. I deserve to be punished. Anissa's done a worse thing. She deserves to be punished. I think that she is acting out a principle she wants Mark to live up to. But, like, it's totally not her place.
But let's talk about the cliffhanger of this issue,
Yeah.
Lisa, as a first-time reader of Invincible, when you get to the moment where you realize that Anissa on Earth has a family and a child, and that child is Mark's, what did you go through?
I mean, there were layers of emotions. I was shocked, and then I was double shocked that she named her son Mark after the guy she raped.
Well, yeah, I like I don't like. I can't possibly begin to understand
How do
what
you
Anissa is
reframe
going
that
through.
narrative?
Like she's done some work, right?
Like, I think she's a Viltrumite. They're taught the principle that there need to be more Viltrumites at any cost.
And you take.
And she
Right.
made that happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
And
shudder.
She's proud of taking that son from Mark. That was her goal, and she
That was
got
her
it.
goal. Do you think that she's proud? I think
I
think she was going to apologize.
I think that she is on a journey with her emotions and a journey dealing with her actions the way that every character in Invincible is. And the expression on her face when she's looking at her son on that last page of that issue, it's ambiguous, purposefully so, but that ambiguity I think is suggestive as well. Like I think
Right.
she's probably going through a lot of the similar emotions that Eve is going through.
I think she's going through a lot of similar emotions that Nolan went through when he first came to Earth. She has a partner. I'm going to presume that he's a human being, right?
Yeah.
And she has another baby much younger than Marky. And so I think that she is acclimating to Earth life and reflecting on her past.
Yeah. So the next issue, we see what it's been like on Earth for the superheroes, for the Guardians of the Globe. We get a great Brit cameo. But predominantly this issue is dealing with Mark's feelings regarding Nolan working with Robot.
Right. And so Robot is doing the hard sell to Mark about all of the changes that he's made and how everyone is ultimately happier, healthier, safer, all of that stuff.
It's a really great 2-page splash of Rex.
But, and Mark and Nolan go out to space and have yet another conversation about the situation on Earth where Mark has the point of view of Rex is a villain. He's killed everyone that we knew. He is going to kill again. He's not to be trusted. And Nolan says, Mark, please listen to the man. Look at what he's done. Think about this rationally and without emotion. And I think that Mark, he is extremely emotional about everything that Robot has done, betraying his friends and betraying their principles.
But he's also detaching.
But I think he is also looking at this rationally, where he goes like, well, Rex is a betrayer and he's going to betray again. His success is built on lies. And so inevitably this house of cards is going to come down.
Maybe. To me, I think he is rationalizing, and his great lengths that he's taking to rationalize is a form of detachment. That he's still struggling with, that's Earth, and I've taken myself out of the game.
To me, this makes me think about the episode of Dakota Ring. Is that the second time I've brought up Dakota Ring in this episode?
No, you have not brought it up before.
I'm obsessed with this podcast right now.
You have brought it up many times this week to me.
But they have an episode about the dress. Remember the viral dress?
Is it
blue? Is it white? And when you listen to that Dakota Ring, I'm just going to spoil it for you. Some people, when they look at something, their narrative makes them see it a certain way, and there is no unseeing it that way. And I think that is the situation with Rex, where Nolan, as a person who's been raised Viltrumite and in a Viltrumite culture,
who was going to basically do what Robot did,
is going to look at Robot's success and go like, clearly the proof is in the pudding, things are better. Where Mark is looking at it having been brought up in,
Earth
on Earth and in
yeah.
American
with
culture.
human morality.
And he goes like, he's a murderer and he is a liar and that's not okay.
Right.
So I think that it's just like, they're not going to see eye to eye on this. Like, I am a huge fan of not having a conversation where two people aren't going to change each other's minds. And so Mark does go like, okay,
peace out.
Things are not the same. We're going to go back home to Kurthak or whatever it's called.
Yeah, back to their like pink sky paradise.
Right.
Tera's a little mad. She doesn't want to go, but she's a kid.
Yeah, she's
She'll
a
get
kid.
used to it.
Who do you know who is also a little bit mad is Debbie, who like lets them leave with a little bit of a guilt trip.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
She is a mom.
her
Nolan's
last
dad.
words, like,
Debbie's
you
mom.
guys are the worst. I'm surprised you stayed as long as you did. Glad you're alive, son. Like, you know, like, you can call your mom every once in a while.
Nolan's like, be careful out there.
Yeah.
And I will, Dad. I will, Dad. Keep an eye on Rex, okay? And then off they go, and we get just a little bit of alone time between Mark and Eve on the starship.
Right. I think that this might be the most Eve has been processing a lot on her own, acting out and seeing that she's not really getting the affirmation for her behavior that she would want. An ongoing theme that comes up in this book is like Eve is never not impressed by being on a starship, you know?
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And then Mark says, like, I'm always shocked when I think about all of the things that qualify as normal to me now. Space travel, flying, aliens, being betrayed.
Yep.
And then Eve is clearly has an emotion.
I don't mean you, Eve.
Right. And she replies, you're too good for me, right? Because
She's still got the guilt. She's still got the regret.
She's still got the guilt. She's been looking to be punished by Mark, and he has not done that. And so that makes her feel even worse because she wants him to be bad.
Yeah.
To make up for her being bad.
He says that, you know, I'm not too bad. I'm not too good.
He says, we're just right? You suck some.
I suck
some. That's what makes us perfect for each other, which I think does kind of put kind of a button on what Eve has been going through. I think that that's kind of what she wanted to hear.
Yeah, and when they get back to their pink sky paradise, they agree that they're just going to hang here and that it's just...
This is clearly a place that doesn't have any problems and will never have problems.
Yeah, and of course, dun dun dun, Thragg is going to send out 2 of his kids to find Mark Grayson and obliterate him. That's how this issue ends.
Right.
And the last 2 issues of this storyline of Full House are basically one long fight sequence.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off with Thragg calling up Oliver and going, hey, don't worry about this, but we're going to kill your brother.
This is your last test of commitment.
Yeah, so, you know, just sit back. And of course, Oliver cannot sit back because even if he is, and we don't necessarily think that he is, but even if he is betraying Alan, he doesn't want Mark, Eve, and Tera to die.
Right.
And so he goes off to the rescue, and then here comes the incoming villains, Thragg's 2 kids, and it's go time.
Oh, poor Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie gets it first. Onan's the name, right?
Yeah, Onan is the boy and Ursula is the girl.
Thank you. Onan swoops on in, obliterates Eddie. Tera basically becomes this football passed back and forth between Mark and Eve. Onan and Ursula want to take her out first, or are going to torture Mark and Eve by killing their progeny first.
Mm-hmm.
And these fight sequences, I mean, they are so intense. They are so painful and scary. Exceptional Invincible fighting, giving Ryan Ottley's violence a run for his money.
Yeah. And I think that Mark and Eve do a great job of recognizing each other's strengths. Eve is actually the more powerful fighter because of her powers. So she stays to fight the twins while Mark takes Tera and starts flying as fast as he can.
Yeah, and she's terrified. You're going too fast, Daddy, but he cannot slow down. Eve gets her leg ripped off.
But it was already a robot leg.
Still pretty traumatic for Tera to see.
But yeah, because Tera did not know that her mother had a robot leg.
Yeah, and we get this splash page where Mark goes supersonic with Tera in her arms, and Tera is terrified. So scary, and she cannot breathe. And Mark has to slow down, or he's going to kill this little girl. And then Onan, boom, right into the back of Mark, and Mark drops Tera, and Tera's falling to her death. And oh, wait, hold up. Tera can fly, Lisa.
Yeah. Can I take a moment? I know that this episode is getting long, but I think that, like, we have the initial scene where Tera is going like, you're flying too fast. I'm getting scared. And Mark says like, I know that you're scared, but I'm trying to protect you. And I'm going to fly really high and I need you to be brave. And he asks, can you be brave for me, Tera? And she says, yes, Daddy.
It's like
heartbreaking. I'm getting choked up talking about it.
Same.
But like contrasting how Mark was raised versus how Tera was raised. Some could argue he should have been training Tera for this the whole time. And maybe he should have been doing the, like, we got to face your fears now so that we're not having to face them in conflict. But, like, to me, I think this shows how much trust Mark has built with Tera.
That's an excellent
in this
point.
time, where Tera has the understanding that he's not going to push her if he doesn't have to. He wants to respect her boundaries. And so, like, because this trust has been built, she's not having a full-on freak out. She knows that her dad is going to keep her as safe as he needs to.
So how confident, Lisa, when you were reading this action scene that Tera was going to survive?
I felt like everyone was going to survive. Like, these are all of the main characters. And so they're all going to survive.
We have a friend named Matt who was also a big Invincible fan. And Matt and I were reading this book at the same time as it was being published monthly. And like after every arc, we were like, well, Adam Eve's gonna die soon.
Oh yeah.
Like this is the arc. And so I was never necessarily concerned for Tera, but I thought for sure that this was the moment where Eve was going to be killed.
Wow.
And you know, Kirkman and Walker give me reason to think that that line of thinking was totally A-okay and accurate, because at one point it looks like Adam Eve is killed.
Right. So we get to the point where Tera can fly, or at least hover.
Right.
Like she's somehow stopped herself from falling to the ground, but she has no control over it.
And then Thragg shows up, and that's the moment like, okay, well, if Thragg is here, this is over. Like, someone in this family is going to die.
Thragg goes to pop Tera's skull, like basketball palm style.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And Oliver interferes, and that's when Oliver is killed by Thragg.
Like, gets the punch through the chest. His whole spine and guts go out the back. It's awful. In front of Tera, which makes it all the more
brutal.
Horrible.
Brutal, yeah.
And just sad. And just so sad. Mark gets... What's the guy's name again? What's the kid? Onan. Mark gets Onan by the throat. And how do you feel about this scene where Thragg's like, you're a good guy, you're not going to do anything, and then Mark just crushes Onan's throat?
I think that this is another example of Mark coming to terms with his
situation.
Well, with his primary principle. His primary principle is to keep Tera safe.
Yeah, he's very Dom Toretto that way.
So if that means betraying all of his other principles, so be it. And we all have principles like that. Principles that have primacy over other principles. To me, I think that this is a very honest scene. I think that Mark has been struggling with his line with heroism, and I think that this is when he goes like, okay, this is my primary principle, all other principles be damned.
And then Ursal swoops in and kicks Eve in the back, in the spine, and appears to crush her face with her boot. And then Freudian slip. And then Thragg tears Mark in two.
Twain.
Yeah. So again, Lisa, all right, now we've just seen Eve's head crushed and Mark ripped in two. I remember reading this going like, oh, are the last issues of Invincible going to be about Tera?
Yeah, I 100% thought that Mark and Eve were totally dead.
Right. Okay. But because then we get this page beat where Tera covered in blood, is looking down at the apparent dead bodies of her parents, and she's like, Mom, and Eve's still alive, and she mutters out something, some gibberish, but as she's muttering out that gibberish, she ignites her powers, and her abilities allow her to reform her biology and Mark's biology, and they're nude, but they're alive.
Right, and Tera is relieved and amused that she could see their butts.
And I'm like, Robert Kirkman, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, when I first read this scene, I thought that it was like a Loki's death situation where Eve had somehow created the image.
No, but they had been ripped in two.
They had been ripped in two, and she rebuilt them. So, like, every time she experiences a trauma, her powers become even stronger.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
a powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
So, she rebuilds her family, making them even stronger than they were before.
Yeah, and so this issue ends. This storyline ends. Full House is done, and Eve's like, okay, well, they've gone to this lengths to take us out. We cannot just hang back anymore. The only solution here is to fight.
To face their problems. Can I just read the bubbles?
Please do.
Mark is looking over the dead body of Oliver, it was too late to be saved. And Mark says, I'm sorry I did this. I tried to turn my back on what needs to be done. I was selfish, and now we have to go back, Eve. We have to end this. And Eve replies, I know. If we hope to ever have our lives back for good, we have to fight. So we've been talking about like how they have been depending too much on the forward-looking regulating strategy. And now they have realized that it has caught up with them. Their problems did not resolve themselves without them. And so they're going to have to follow through on being heroes for the Coalition and for Earth.
So the last two trade paperbacks of Invincible are titled The End of All Things Parts 1 and 2. We're going to cover both of them on the next episode. I got to ask, Lisa, what do you want out of Invincible's ending? Like, there are a lot of threads hanging out there, right? There's obviously the Thragg situation that they now have to deal with. Robot, Earth, Nolan's relationship with Mark seems pretty good. Like, the death of Oliver, so we're going to have to, like, deal with that.
Haluma is now a single parent.
Oh my gosh, her kids. Tera, as a child of Mark and Eve. Like, what do you want? What do you expect that we're going to get in the last issues of Invincible?
I don't know. Like, it is called The End of All Things. So I have, like, what I want in my heart is I just want all of the characters I love to be okay. Like, I want Haluma to be okay. I want Alan to be okay. I want Mark and Eve and Tera to all be okay. But in terms of, like, what do I want for planet Earth? I have no idea. I guess I don't want Rex in power anymore. But at the same time, I don't want a bunch of Earthlings to have to be killed in order to do that. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
And then what would a post-robot Earth look like? And is that a better place?
Right. Like, to me, I go, like, Rex has to do something heinous before Mark goes in to kill him.
Who do you think is the great villain of Invincible? Having read all of Invincible so far. Is it Thragg? Is it Robot?
I think that it is Thragg and Robot. They both have their own objectives, neither of which are particularly humanistic.
You know, but when you have two villains, one guy gets taken out first. Which guy gets taken out first?
Yeah, or you team up with one guy in order to, let me think. So I guess, what would be the more surprising turn? I guess Mark et al. Teaming up with Thragg to defeat Rex, I guess, would be the way that
Robert
it might
Kirkman is a creator that loves to subvert.
Yeah, I know. So
he's like in this arc alone, he's just like constantly subverting expectations.
So to me, it's just like, is he going to double subvert by doing the predictable thing? I don't know.
Are you having a good time with Invincible?
I'm having an amazing time, and it's a book I feel super not safe predicting things about, especially knowing that it makes it less fun.
Oh gosh, this has been our longest conversation on Invincible so far on Mark and Eve.
But in terms of a session, I think emotionally we are leaving Mark and Eve in a much better place with, of course, a whole new set of traumas, which, I mean, that's life.
Well, I mean, my worry for Mark and Eve, because what they have experienced and what we have seen them do over the course of this arc, having recovered from the events of Reboot, is, okay, let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, we reached a point of being uncomfortable. And then something distracts.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Something distracts. Let's talk about it. Something distracts. And now they have this huge distraction of, well, we gotta take care of Thragg.
Yeah.
Or he's coming for us. We gotta go for him. I just worry when that's resolved, if that's resolved, do they continue the pattern of, we talk a little bit, we don't address everything.
It's hard because we have to process our emotions and live our lives at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I think with big problems, you're not going to fix it in one session, where it's just you start the conversation, you give each other kind of food for thought, you separate and process your emotions separately while you live your life, and then you come back together and you have another conversation. Then you process apart and come together.
Yeah, so is their pattern actually a bad thing? I framed it like it was, but maybe that's just life. Maybe they're just doing the marriage thing.
I think, if anything is a bad thing, Mark trying to keep his emotions away from Eve.
Stuffing.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
stuffing on both cases.
But, we have to remember when we give permission to feel, we also have to give permission to fail. Yeah. I think that Eve recognized that her lashing out was not giving her the affirmation that she needed.
Yeah.
And so she had to come to this place of self-forgiveness in another way.
The fact that they have survived, that their relationship has survived to this point, having gone through everything that they have gone through, is, impressive.
I think that they have the thing in the back of their mind where, but we'll be together. Where,
they never doubt the relationship surviving
and
existing.
Brad and I talk about that a lot in terms of our relationship is we've never had a fight that has led to us going maybe we shouldn't be together.
Yeah.
We have the comfort of knowing no matter how ugly things might get between us.
Lisa can get real mad at Brad. Brad can get real mad at Lisa. At no point do I feel like, anyway, speak for yourself, Lisa, that this fight will end in Brad and Lisa cannot be a couple anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Big time same. So I feel like Mark and Eve have that kind of commitment, and I think that I think that Mark is right in saying that it was understandable that Eve enter another relationship 4 years after he died.
Yeah.
And though you're not allowed to do that.
Okay. Good to know.
If I die sad forever,
land.
Who knows? I might just be haunting you. You don't know. So I'm joking partially.
She is not.
I never felt like their relationship was in jeopardy, even knowing that she had found love outside of the relationship when she thought he was dead.
All right. We've been loving talking Mark and Eve. Obviously.
Yeah.
Lisa, is there anything that we need to address? Anything that we have learned from our time with Mark and Eve up to this point? Anything that we have learned and we're going to apply using Mark Brackett and Permission to Feel?
I think my biggest takeaway lesson from this session is no matter what the cover of a book is going to tell you, there is no easier way and more efficient way to have emotions.
What we learn every time we read one of these things is that the answers aren't necessarily there. Like, there's no like easy solution that comes with any self-help guide.
Right.
They just give you the vocabulary and some tools to help you look inward.
Yeah, but like sometimes I get on my high horse and I think, oh, from up here, I can amalgamate everything that I've learned to unlock the answer of me being a really a way more perfect person, and it's just not going to happen.
Like, for me, I think that there are certain books that offer better ideas than others, and I don't think you are necessarily all in with Permission to Feel.
I love R, U, and L. And
Right.
I love using a mood meter.
Right.
I find that to be so fun.
But my big takeaway from the Permission to Feel side of things is the failing of the expressing.
Yeah.
Right? And as you said, this idea of like, just because you are going to express something doesn't mean that the other party is going to deal with it in the way that you would like them to deal with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't express something.
Right.
Right? That you have to put it out there, and then you have to regulate emotions. They have to regulate emotions. I think that's all good stuff to contemplate.
Right.
And Permission to Fail is, that's my freaking life motto.
Right.
Like,
I think like what Mark is doing, Mark Brackett, that's confusing. I think what Dr. Mark Brackett is doing is he is more intent on the culture shift side, where he wants to create a society where everybody is safe to express their emotions.
Permission to Feel is not necessarily a book intended for one person. It's intended for the culture.
Yeah. And I think like trying to apply it like going like, okay, I'm going to have permission to feel and Brad is going to have permission to feel, and then we're going to just try to force this on everyone else in our lives. It's not that easy. And like,
Permission to Feel is not a scalpel.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not a scalpel for a couple.
Yeah,
to get in there.
Like, I think that if everyone, like, on the planet goes like, okay, we all have permission to feel now, and that is just the rule of the land, you know what I mean? That would be a beautiful thing. But I think that, intergenerationally, people are just going to have a different set of display rules.
Yeah. We got to stop, Lisa.
Yeah, I know.
We got to move on. We got to start the work of dealing with Invincible volumes 1 and 2 of The End of All Things, the last 2 trade paperbacks of Invincible. There are no more Invincible comics after these 2 trade paperbacks, although there are a couple short stories. Like there's a Battle Beast story.
Ooh.
That was recently published in the Skybound Anniversary comic that we might want to tap on at some point.
How fun.
But yeah, so our next counseling session is going to be on Mark and Eve. It's going to be the final Mark and Eve episode, covering The End of All Things, parts 1 and 2. But that will actually not be our very next episode. Our next episode is another creator conversation. This one with a great British Bake Off contestant.
I'm beside myself. I love Great British Bake Off. For those of you who don't know that particular detail about me, I did for many weeks have a Great British Bake Off blog where I was making the technical bakes.
Yes.
And
I was eating a lot of scones.
We were both eating a lot of scones, and it really slowed life down. Like, it's just a lot of white flour and butter.
Lisa read this comic that this Great British Bake Off contestant did and wrote a really lovely review for Comics Beat, and I'll include a link in the show notes to that review. And Lisa said to me, Brad, we have to find a way to get this person on the podcast. And then we spent a couple weeks making that happen.
Romancing.
Romancing that publicist, romancing that creator. And thankfully they agreed. So our next episode is a conversation with Kim Joy of the Great British Bake Off.
Season 9.
And the author of the new graphic novel from Comixology, Turtle Bread, which is out now. You can read it digitally. It's great. It is very much a comic book couples counseling book.
Yeah.
It's all about feelings. It's all about anxiety. Lisa saw so much of herself in it. I saw so much of Lisa in it. I found it really special as a result. Highly, 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 highly recommend Turtle Bread. Please check it out and then meet us on the next episode with our chat with Kim Joy. And then the episode after that will probably be our End of All Things episode. But I think it's going to take some time to plot, write, and prepare for that Invincible episode, as all these Invincible episodes have been. I mean, they've been Herculean efforts, and I've loved this series, and I'm going to be sad that it's over, but I'm also excited that it's going to be over soon.
I'm excited to have all 4 episodes out there. Like, it always feels good to complete a series with a couple and then release them into the universe with everything they've learned from us.
Absolutely.
Also coming up, we have some more screenings at the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester.
Yes, as we already mentioned at the start of this episode, Batman, The Mask of the Phantasm is on the big screen at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia on the 25th of June at 4 o'clock. Tickets are on sale now. Get them before it sells out like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did. Link in the show notes. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World will be at the Alamo on the 30th of July, also at 4 o'clock. Tickets are on sale for that too.
Yes. Okay, Brad, do you want to just like get out of here and get away from our problems? I'm sure they won't catch up with us.
Will wherever we go have a pink sky?
Yeah, guaranteed.
Okay, good.
Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on all social medias at MouthDork. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art and show posters, send them to Karen Charm at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google, and Apple Podcasts.
That's all of them.
If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
There's actually like a lot of other places you can listen to us, like Good Pods.
Yeah.
Listen on Good Pods as well. Leave us a review on Good Pods. That'd be nice. Podchaser also. If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on Instagram and Twitter at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, please.
And if you'd like to do an active service, why not write a review of the show while you're there? We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
And very needy, Lisa.
Yeah.
Very needy.
Thirsty.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open. You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Count. Do I know how to speak English anymore?
I don't know.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson. You like that diction? I'm bringing the diction. You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I've forgotten how to speak. And I'm Lisa Gullickson. You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson. What's wrong?
I don't know.
Am I slurring my speech?
No.
What am I doing?
You have a weird pause in the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast.
Comic Book Couples Counseling? That's
go.
how I always say it.
Let's do it one more time.
Giving me a complex. You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the 4-color realm. In this episode, we're ignoring our past and embracing our romantic future. Is that what we said last week?
No, I've changed this.
This is the new copy?
This is new copy.
How do you feel about it?
I mean, I thought about it for 1 second, and then I typed it up.
Okay.
And actually, I was typing as I was thinking, which is weird. It's how I always type and think. And think and type. Lisa's changing it.
Okay. I got it. You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the 4-color realm. In this episode, we've gone back in time and come right back, having changed nothing, with Mark Grayson and Adam Eve as experienced in the Full House arc of Invincible. That's not right.
Yes.
Is it Full House?
Yes. Yes.
From Image Comics and Skybound Entertainment, and we're applying Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel, Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Society Thrive to their relationship woes. Would you like me to redo it?
Yes.